The Sonic Adventure games definitely have flaws. Pretty much everyone knows that these games aren't perfect and are honestly pretty aggressively lacking in polish. But the general consensus that I seem to hear about them is that they're still overall solid 3D platformers with a good bit of jank thrown in that Sonic fans should be able to overlook. With this video, I want to highlight how I think that Sega and Sonic Team got a lot right with their first 3D outing for Sonic, and how I feel that Sonic Adventure 2 actually backpedals in lots of ways, making it an overall less appealing game for me to visit again. I've had these opinions for a while now, and even though Adventure 2 is so beloved, I'd like to propose the question on whether or not it holds up to its predecessor. So without further ado, look, I remember a time where Sonic was cool. Many people would argue that the adventure games themselves were the downfall of the series, or that there's never been a good 3D Sonic game, but I don't feel like the public perception of the series was really tarnished until Sonic 06. Sure, in the early 2000s, Sonic's image wasn't flourishing Bart Simpson style like it was in the 90s, but Sonic and Sega by extension were still seen as worthwhile inclusions in the gaming space. I bring this up because I think a shift in perception occurred with the adventure titles. What were once seen as good, sometimes even great games, were reevaluated years down the line under a more negative context. A context of 15 years worth of mediocre releases, only sometimes subsided by a good game here and there. It's hard for me to say whether I think it's fair that this happened. After all, especially in the case of the Sonic Adventure titles, these games were going to age poorly and fall out of favor over the years anyway. But I feel personally that some of the vitriol placed on Adventure 1 specifically is just a tad extreme and reliant on the poor performance of future games. And if you're not buying it, just look what happens when you search Sonic Adventure 1 Reviews 1999 on Google. You get the original IGN review with a favorable rating, and the one they did 11 years later with a rating of 3.5 out of 10 when Sonic was cool to hate. But let's be honest, Sonic Team did this to themselves. They neglected the series and made wrong decision after wrong decision, and I'll be the first to say that Sonic Team can be truly terrible sometimes. But that shouldn't retroactively adjust the quality of games that came out over 20 years ago. Sonic Adventure is a good game. Sonic Adventure 2 is... well, we'll come back to that later. Gameplay-wise, Sonic Adventure is smooth as butter and confident in its mechanics. There's a flow to this game that keeps me invested throughout my many playthroughs. Presentation-wise, the Dreamcast or PC version with mods looks great to this day, and it's hard to believe that this game came out ostensibly during the 5th generation of game consoles. The soundtrack is phenomenal, one of the best in a series filled with great soundtracks. The game is just charming. It still has a 90s Sonic aesthetic, despite being the first game to feature the modern redesign of Sonic. The levels are colorful and remind me of that Saturn Sonic aesthetic in games like 3D Blast and Sonic R, and Sonic's redesign in this game was only hated by losers. But, now that I've gushed on this game a bit, I need to talk about the massive feline in the room that's just chilling in the ocean trying to get some fish. Okay, everyone talks about Big, but the overarching issue most people seem to have with Sonic Adventure is not just that one campaign. It's the fact that there are 6 different campaigns of varying levels of quality. This is a completely fair criticism, and Sonic Adventure is not a consistently solid product in many ways. The game makes you replay bosses, replay minigames, go through hub worlds which can be cryptic at times, and worst of all, it makes you play through all campaigns to get the true ending. As such, the consensus for Adventure 1 seems to be that the Sonic levels are mostly great. Tails and Knuckles campaigns are pretty fun. Amy and Gamma's are okay, and Big the Cat's campaign is unplayable garbage. But here's the thing, was it really all that bad? Look, I'm not saying it should be required to beat the game, or that it should even be there in the first place. I get it. It's fucking fishing. But don't forget that the game does tell you what to do, and the campaign is only 4 levels. I beat Big's campaign in maybe 15 minutes for this video. This admittedly annoying blemish certainly isn't enough to turn a good game into a bad game. What about Amy's story, or Gamma's? These also seem to receive a fair bit of hate, but I think it's a bit extreme. I don't mind these campaigns, in fact I actively enjoy them. Yes, I get that Amy's campaign is short and shallow, and Gamma's is button mashy and repetitive, but for one, I love getting to play as Amy for the first time in a Sonic game and don't mind her gameplay. And 2, Gamma's gameplay is bland, sure, but his story alone makes up for it. For those who don't know, Gamma's storyline involves him finding his family and shooting them with guns. But it's okay, because Gamma has become self-aware and realizes that there are animals inside of Robotnik's creations, and in order to set them free, he must destroy the robots one by one, ending his story by destroying himself. You then see him and his brethren, now freed as birds, at the end. This is a great side story for a Sonic game and harkens back to the days where a Sonic game could tell a meaningful story with no dialogue at all. To defend this game even further and get into my next section, I need to talk about Tails and Knuckles. Tails and Knuckles both have something in common in Adventure 1. Their implementation in the game is good enough to where it sours my view a lot on the sequel to Sonic Adventure. So what did they change and why did they change it? Well, I'm going to try to answer the what, but I can't answer the why. Tails in SA1 is a pretty straightforward campaign. It's simple, but it works. You race Sonic to the goals of a few stages, fight a few bosses, and do some sandboarding. Tails controls exactly how he should in a 3D space. He can run about as fast as Sonic, fly in the air to access shortcuts, and attack with his tails. He's acrobatic, just like the Genesis games. So, given that this framework was already built for Adventure 2, you'd figure that Tails would control similarly, right? Nah, let's just put him in a mech and make it play like Gamma's stages. Not only is this just an ill-advised idea, but these stages go on for way longer than any stage in Gamma's campaign, and there's way more of them. Mech levels now take up a third of the entire game in SA2 as opposed to just having 5 in the original. They even let you control as Tails in the Chao Garden outside of the mech just to tease you. Okay, so they screwed up Tails. At least we still have Knuckles stages. And I don't have as much of a problem with these stages. The music is nice, Knuckles controls fine, and overall they're not bad. Except there's one really stupid thing they did here. They completely nerfed the radar from the original. In SA1, your radar would actively search for all 3 emerald pieces at the same time. But in SA2, you're locked to just the one the game wants you to find at any particular time. You can be right next to an emerald and it won't show up on your radar because you didn't do it in the right order. This is so stupid considering it had to be a purposeful nerf of the design of the first game. I get that Knuckles stages in Adventure 1 can be a bit short, but messing with the way you find emeralds isn't your solution. It doesn't help that the levels in SA2 for emerald hunting are absolutely massive, meaning you can spend over 10 minutes in these levels at times, which seems to be a theme in Adventure 2. Once again, it's not terrible, but it's just so stupid that it makes my head spin. Unfortunately, the gameplay of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles is about all Sonic Adventure 2 has to offer, because the Dark playthrough has the same gameplay styles, just replaced with Shadow, Eggman, and Rouge. But at least they got the Sonic and Shadow gameplay right. Right? The answer is yes, with the big asterisk on it. Does it stand on its own as a fun blend of fast 3D platforming action? Yes. But unfortunately, compared to the first Adventure title, there's some glaring missteps on Sonic's gameplay here. Okay, yeah, before you turn this video off, just know I love Adventure 2. I have the same nostalgia with this game that a lot of you watching certainly have, but it's soured in my view quite a bit, and I go back to it so much less than Adventure 1. And the main reason for that is that there's a series of minor missteps here that make my head spin. Sonic's control in SA2 is, for lack of a better term, gimped compared to Adventure 1. It's hard to describe, and while it's not bad and still plenty fun, they ruined a couple major things here. First of all, it's not Heroes bad yet, but Sonic is a bit too slippery and sensitive in this game. Secondly, they got rid of the floaty jump that helps with platforming. And third, they ruined the spin dash, and it was never once used again in the same way it was in Adventure 1. The spin dash has this annoying delay to it that wasn't present in Adventure 1. That last point is especially important because these games are about momentum and maintaining speed, but also using the tools at your disposal to do tricky jumps or completely master levels. This is something that carries nicely from the Genesis classics to Adventure 1. Master the spin dash jump and you will be rewarded. This same philosophy is unfortunately one of the many things that didn't carry over from Adventure to its sequel. An argument in Adventure 2's defense you could make is that you go from level to level, just like a classic Sonic game, and you don't have to worry about a big empty hub world with nothing to do. And while that is a valid criticism, I think it's kinda cancelled out by the fact that in Adventure 1, even if you hate the rest of the game besides Sonic's gameplay, you can just choose to do Sonic's campaign. Unfortunately, in Adventure 2, there's no such option, as the mech and emerald hunting levels are shuffled in and ultimately work as kind of a pace breaker for me. It's sad to say, but Adventure 2 doesn't really hold up in my eyes. And that's a conclusion I'm not happy to come to. It can still be good fun at times, but its constant missteps are equal parts dumb and completely avoidable, especially when compared to its predecessor. Sonic Adventure 2 is a classic game remembered fondly by thousands, but it's not the sequel that it should have been. I'm not making this video to shit on what is many people's favorite game from childhood. I just felt like I needed to speak my mind on why I love the original Sonic Adventure and what actually made it good. I feel like most Sonic fans like Adventure 2 more, solely out of nostalgia. But with this video, I'm asking those of you who feel that way to look at Adventure 2 with a critical lens and hold it up to the first game and ask yourself, does it hold up by comparison? I know it will be impossible to change many people's minds, but if I can at least convince one person to open up Adventure 1 for the first time in a while and have as much fun with it as I do, I'll have done my job.